Hey everyone, welcome to the Way of Champions podcast this week. It's John, and I am so excited to be joined this week by David Baird. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about David and his brand new book, The Scoreboard Soccer. David holds a UEFA A license and a UEFA Elite Youth A license. He currently works in Scotland for he's the coach, educator, and football development officer for the Scottish Football Association. He's coached in the US, UAE, and also in Scotland for Heart of Midlothian Football Club Academy. And this book is really interesting because David and I connected. He sent me a copy of the book, and the book is all about how do we bring more enjoyment and competitiveness to the programs we run with our little kids. And so David came up with this concept of scoreboard soccer, and we are going to explore that today and hopefully give you ideas of, regardless of whatever sport you coach, how can you use this concept to make your practices more competitive, to create different scenarios within your games, and yeah, just make it a little more exciting and fun. And his stories and the success that he's had with it, I think is pretty cool. And that's why I wanted to have him on the podcast. So, before we jump in, thanks to all of you for listening, for all of the bulk book orders that I've been fulfilling. I've been on the road a ton here and I'm just playing catch up now. So thanks for all of your support. Jerry's been writing a new book and we've been super, super busy and now got a little moment to breathe and catch up on those. So if you want to get a quick bulk book order in either for your team this spring or for your program for next fall, just email me, John, John at changingthegameproject.com. All right. And also a quick shout out to our sponsor, Sprocket Sports. These are the amazing people who have sponsored this podcast for a couple of years now. They build the most beautiful websites. They have the best player registration system and team communication that I've used. And they have the best customer service, bar none, that I've ever worked with as well. So if you want to build a new website and get a new registration tool for your league or for your club, check them out, sprocketsports.com, and let them know that you heard about them on the Way Champions podcast. All right. But for now, get ready, get set. It's David Baird. We're going to talk about scoreboard soccer and how you can use this regardless of sport. Enjoy, everyone. David, welcome to the Way Champions podcast, bud.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me on. As we've discussed, I'm a huge fan of the podcast. So, yeah, thanks for having me on today.
Well, I'm excited, and I know a lot of Scottish people, and some of them need translators, but you're not one of them. So I think we're gonna be just fine. Going through all this and talking about your great book, Scoreboard Soccer. But I want to start with just kind of your background. You have this fascinating background in coaching, and what I actually was when you sent me the book, it was like, wow, Kevin Keegan wrote the foreword of the book. And for those who aren't soccer people, I mean, Kevin Keegan's a legendary player and coach. And so where did that come from?
Yeah, the story with Kevin Keegan is an interesting one. I was a young coach studying at college and then latterly university to become a sports coach, and I had to get a job to fund my studies, right? And there was a place called Kevin Keegan's Soccer Circus that opened up in Glasgow, not
Hmm.
too far away from where I was studying. And I thought that, that would be good to do something that kind of ties into my studies, get some experience coaching, but fully anticipated it'd be one of these things that Kevin kind of put his name on and you would never see him or you would never meet him. So I prepared for the job interview and then I sat down and the other side of the desk walked in, Kevin Keegan and sat down to interview me for the job. And I was a little bit starstruck at that moment. And it turned out he was, really hands-on and very often he was there. And a really cool concept, the soccer circus. He kind of described it as a cross between football and Disneyland. It was these kind of electronic games where there would be lasers on the floor and you had to dribble the ball over them and you would get a score against your friends and there were targets on the wall. And we see a lot of this stuff these days, but this was, 2006, 2007, and it was really, really cool stuff. and he became like a bit of a mentor to me. We also had, a football pitch in the soccer circus, so we would run like birthday parties and like striker clinics and
Hmm.
different technical sessions. So to learn from someone like that, and to really open your eyes on, if you make soccer really, really good fun, the amount of hidden learning that's in there is unbelievable, and how hard children in particular will work if they feel like they're just playing games and just trying to get a score and they're just doing their best. And probably all of those messages, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but they've probably never left me. Trying to make, sport really, really good fun. So the second branch that Kevin opened was in Dubai in the Middle East. And I was actually the only member of staff he took from the Glasgow branch to the Middle East to help open up over there. And do some staff training and things like that. And it was great. And he's someone I've kept in touch with. And when I phoned him with my scoreboard soccer idea, which obviously we can come on to, yeah, he was just full of praise and he really liked it. And he was more than happy to write the foreword for the book, which was really nice.
Yeah, well, what's cool in his forward, he talks about as a kid growing up, free play and the enjoyment factor and again, you're playing on the street and oh my God, there's a parked car. How do you work your way around that? And all these sort of things that in this day and age we are on great beautiful pitches and we use the word constraints and all this sort of stuff. Well, just the playground we played in where we used to be the constraint and the giant hole in the middle and all this sort of stuff that created that creativity around the game. And so I just love the fact that he also called it the soccer circus. But again, this focus on if we promote joy first and foremost, learning naturally happens. And it doesn't mean that there's not a space for coaching, but when we coach the joy out of it, then kids are like, yeah, I can go do something else.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something I touch on a little bit through kind of some of the coach education I do and some of the maybe newer or younger volunteers I work with. Loads of mistakes I maybe made when I was younger and across my coach education journey I've had these kind of light bulb moments and I've learned from other coach educators and one of the things I've learned is that element of autonomy and children being able to do what they want to do is huge. And I think about my own journey where I had very little autonomy in the house because, there was only four channels and somebody else chose what was on them. I couldn't phone my best friend if my mum was on the internet. And, we had like Mario and Luigi on the screen and you had one button to jump and one button to run. That was about as far as, autonomy went. So I
Hmm.
would go on the street and you would choose, what friends are you going to ask to come and play? What game are you going to play? What are the rules of the game? Let's make up a new game. And you had all this autonomy and all this fun. And then when your parents asked you to come home for dinner, you didn't want to go home. You just were having, so much fun. And unfortunately now, I think in the modern world, in some regards, those environments have flipped, where games, consoles, social media, streaming companies really understand autonomy. It's not, watch this. It's what do you want to watch?
Hmm.
Children being able to literally type in what they want to view and view it anytime they want is a
And
really
then if you
appetizing
like that,
alternative.
perhaps you'll like this, right? Like
Yeah.
let's send you the next thing that probably you'll like if that thing was good.
Yeah, and that's the autonomy. If you and I, pull out our social media feeds right now, they'll both be different because they're showing what we want to see. I mean, mine will just be full of changing the game project stuff. I'm not sure what yours will have on there. But yeah, like, and what we need to be really careful of, these children, and I talk about children because that's the majority of where my coaching is. They have these appetizing alternatives, these really autonomy driven. It's no longer Mario. It's well, you name the characters, you design the hairstyle, you design the world that they live in. Autonomy, autonomy, autonomy. If they come to our soccer practice and the coach is like, okay, I'm going to pick the teams and you have to play two touch and you pass to John and then you move to the code and, you're the defender, so don't cross the halfway line, stay in your position. If we take away all this autonomy that we know children love, I think we potentially lose them to the game and they go and do these alternatives. So it's about being clever with your session design, clever with the environment you create, that there's a lot of kind of co-creation there and a lot of autonomy within structure,
Mhm.
which is something I think is just so important for that love of the game.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about if kids have enjoyment and they have autonomy, then that breeds intrinsic motivation. And then they go home and they pick up the ball and they go to the wall or they grab a friend and they go shoot or whatever it is. But those are the ingredients. Now, I mean, you have a UEFA A license and I wasn't familiar with this, the Elite Youth A license. How does this everything we've discussed so far jive with a lot of what higher level coach education focuses on? Because I think every coach knows this deep down, but too much, I think, of coach education focuses on periodization and
Mm,
the tactics and this, which is all critically important,
mm.
but it's not necessarily what makes the kids come back the next day.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is down to the quality of you as a coach being able to pull out what you get from different resources, whether that's coach education, books, social media, watching others coach, and applying it within the right circumstance. The coach education journey I've been on in regards to official coach education, I've often thought it's about my future self. It's about, do I maybe want to go and coach in an academy one day or like a really high performing men's or women's team, and you go on that C license, B license, A license. And I think it's down to the quality of the coach to say, well, UEFA A license content, playing out from the back in a 4-4-2 isn't relevant to these 7 and 8 year olds in front of me who need to develop a love for the game. And
Hmm.
that's where more informal coach education has a real place. And a lot of really credible football associations are offering that. There's a lot of really,
Yeah.
really good stuff out there. I think about the English FA's Play Phase course
Yeah.
is a fantastic course that you can do in your own time. It's an e-learning. Yeah, and I think that's down to the role of the coach is about taking your learning experiences and meeting the players where they are on their journey.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think as well, and I'm not familiar with that English course, but certainly in the United States with the US
Mm,
Soccer Federation pushed a lot to a model which I followed for a long time because it's just realistic is sort of a play practice play model
yeah.
for young kids, right? So show up and play, get them there. And I mean, like, I introduced this idea to coaches across numerous sports, and I recognize that in some sports it's maybe more difficult to use this than it might be in soccer, football.
Mhm.
But it's really interesting of you want your kids to show up on time, play first. They'll be
Yeah.
sprinting across the parking lot. You want them to burn off the sugar that they've been given in the car on the drive to training, play first. You want them who has been sitting in classrooms all day long in front of a computer screen to, just come and be excited to be there. Play
Mm.
first, not stand in line first, not explain some complex activity and then um, when the next kid shows up, have to explain it to him or her again, and you spend the whole time telling directions instead of coaching versus just roll out a ball and play. And I think as we're getting into sort of your scoreboard concept, that idea maybe of, well, if we play and then we break it down and then we play again at the end
Yeah.
is a really great model for young kids who don't really need some formal warm up.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm a big fan of that kind of you arrive, you play, and try and create that environment. So I have worked with a coach in a capacity as his coach educator, a little bit skeptical about play, practice, play because they play the game. You then try and do something a little bit more technical. How are you going to motivate them to do that? But kids are clever, and if you treat them with respect and say, "Look, we're going to do this thing called play, practice, play," the effort you get in the middle, so they can get back into the game. Once
Right.
they've kind of did it to a
If we can
satisfactory
get through
level,
this,
is
that's
huge.
more time
Yeah.
to play at the end
Yeah, and
is a
as you
great
say,
carrot.
they know you're playing at the start, so they're showing up on time, and the attendance is increasing, and just a huge advocate for playing games, and children in the modern world they might see the beautiful game on TV. Obviously, we have a World Cup in North America next year. To think that you would watch let's use the 2022 World Cup final in the men's game as an example. To think you would watch Mbappe score a hat trick, Messi win the World Cup, this insanely exciting game, ask mum and dad, can I try soccer, and then go and stand behind a cone? It's quite heartbreaking, or run around the field instead of playing on the field,
Yeah.
and we've kind of moved away from this idea like, okay, some of that stuff was acceptable when I was younger because I got my football and diet through the street and through playing with my friends and this kind of thing. But now I don't think the game should be like a reward for the practice. Like the game should be the practice. And that's where models like play, practice, play are excellent because we need to build more informal play into our formal coaching sessions.
Yeah. Well, let's start breaking down sort of, the theory behind this is also that, it's not about performance, it's about behaviors. And what we want to
Yeah.
do with kids is draw out certain behaviors because we know that if these behaviors are repeated over time,
Yeah.
that's what's going to make a player better. So talk about the behaviors that you as a football coach, a soccer coach, want to see um, and how they're reinforced by everything we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely, because this is probably the time in the conversation where I contradict myself a lot.
Yeah.
I'm a huge advocate for we have 16 children here. Let's get them into 4v4s and play some games. And I really lean into the games-based approach stuff. But as a volunteer grassroots soccer coach, when I attempted that in certain environments, you're kind of hit by reality as well, where, okay, we're going to play soccer, but David, at this current age and stage of his development, is just so much more advanced than the rest of the kids. And he's getting all
Mhm.
the touches. He's not getting challenged. Some of the other kids are getting really disengaged, and there's some poor behavior creeping in. You have a couple of kids who maybe they love soccer, so when we're saying we're just going to play games, they're leaning into it and they're all in. But then there's a couple of kids whose parents have dropped them at this, summer camp, and they didn't even want to come, and they don't really love this. They've not fallen in love with the game yet. Um, so that's where the scoreboard soccer concept comes in. And for your listeners that aren't familiar with the concept, it's okay, we're going to play 4v4, but at the side of the field, we're going to add a scoreboard. We're going to add and that's just a terminology I use for this like fun challenge at the side of the field that we use to reward the positive behaviors, as you say, John. So one of the most popular scoreboards that we do is like a crossbar challenge. So we
Mhm.
set up a small mini goal with a crossbar, and the kids come over and they try and hit the crossbar and they get a point. But what we do there is we create an environment when they're playing their small-sided game of soccer. The coach is just trying to catch them doing good and just rewarding the behaviors that they want to put value on. So it's 4v4, and if David does dribble the ball by everybody and score, you're rewarding that creativity. You're praising that ability to dribble. David comes to try and hit the crossbar to try and bank that point on the scoreboard. All of a sudden, you've created an environment where other children can actually get some touches of the ball to help their development. And again, they're highly motivated to maybe impersonate David and maybe do what he's just done and try and do that as best as they possibly can. So yeah, I mean, some of my favorite scoreboards we do, beat the goalkeeper, crossbar challenge. We do the water bottle flip challenge. So if you put a water bottle at the side of the field and
Mhm.
the kids need to flip it and land it for a point, your game becomes like the World Cup final because like they all want to come and flip a water bottle for some reason. And then some of the most scoreboards that we've ever came up with are designed by the children themselves. We
Yeah.
give them that autonomy to say, what's the reward going to be today?
Well, let's like take a step back. And so
Mhm.
the most simple scoreboard would be right, you'd have two 4v4, 3v3 games side by side.
Hmm.
And then in the middle, I think you said you might have it's both games are playing keeping score. You might have four cones for each team, and every
Yeah.
time you score a goal, that player has to run off, plop a ball on a cone first team to first team combo team of the both games
Hmm.
wins. Correct? That would be like the most simple model of a scoreboard.
Yeah, that was one of our first scoreboards that was called Connect Four.
Yeah.
So yeah, going all the way back in the journey, I was playing, a 4v4 at a summer camp in New Jersey, and I was like, they're not enjoying this. Some of the more experienced kids
Yeah.
And maybe it's just that they've hit puberty a little bit earlier and they're more physically dominant. They're just
Yeah.
dominating. Some of the other kids are getting really. So that was the very first scoreboard. We had, the red pennies against the blue pennies. We put out 4 red cones and 4 blue cones, and we said, okay, if you score, come and put a ball on your team's cone. And just having that kind of visual scoreboard, that
Hmm.
visual, the blue team have 3 points and the red team have 2 points, the engagement and the effort, it just went through the roof. And then with time, the concept just grew there. We started to do fun things on that particular scoreboard where you can put a ball on your team's cone or you can kick a ball off the other team's cone,
Yeah.
giving them some choice. Um, and then we did some Q&A to say to the children, so is scoring a goal the only good thing you can do on the soccer field? And they're
Yeah.
saying, no, you can communicate, spread out, scan, be creative. We said, okay, if we see any of those things, that might get you a point on the scoreboard as well. And that was the very start of scoreboard soccer. And just by having that visual scoreboard, that tool there to reward effort and increase engagement, the children just absolutely loved it. And since then, we've created a load of scoreboards that are just really good fun. So you're kind of catering for the ones who, okay, they've developed a love for soccer. So the fact you're playing games, they're really invested. But for these kids that need a little bit more gamification and a little bit more fun, those are the ones we've invented. We've got a game called Slam Ball, we've got Connect Four, we've got Finding Nemo. We have all these really fun scoreboards. But then for
Yeah.
the children that are a little bit older, we have scoreboards that are more technical, like come and try and do 20 juggles or come try and do a corner kick challenge or a throw-in challenge. But yeah, so there's lots of different outcomes, I guess you can take the concept in different directions.
Yeah, well, and what I like about it as well is it keeps them thinking, it keeps them engaged, and so it might be something where, like, just for our listeners, right? Like, you score a goal, right? David
Mhm.
scores a goal. Now he's got to run off the field and, put a ball in a cone. Or next level might be he's got to run off the field, do 10 juggles. Now the goal counts, put a ball in the cone. Um, but at the same time, when he's off doing that, well, now the other team has a 4v3 or a 3v2. So it's helping teams also, well, how do we manage the game when we're up a player or down a player without saying, now we're going to play 3v2?
Yeah, and that's where the concept with time, experience as a coach, but also the players' experience, we of course can get a little bit more tactical. So while David's over doing the juggles, are the other team recognizing that 4v3,
Yeah.
and let them problem solve that, let them see. But if they consistently have a 4v3 and they're kind of passing the ball sideways and they're not looking to penetrate and they're not looking to take advantage, that's when we're not making the coach obsolete here. The coach could be working on David at the scoreboard, working with his or her juggles, or the coach could be coming in and saying, "Okay, just hold it there a little second. So what's going on now? Oh well, we've got an overload because David's over
Right.
there. Okay, so should we maybe try and play a little bit quicker and play forward and try and be creative?" And the other side of that is saying to the group of three, so what's your tactic going to be? Well, I guess we could, stay together, defend the goal, try and delay the attack until David recovery runs back in. So the hidden learning within it, I think, is quite realistic to player development. We see quite often, it sounds crazy that you're sending John to the scoreboard, right? That might sound like a crazy idea to some coaches, but we've seen before David's had the ball, he's been looking to pass to John, and then John's been sent to the scoreboard. Within
Mhm.
that split second, the players had to think of a different solution. They've had to dribble or turn back or turn away from pressure. And in a few years, that's just going to be, oh, well, that player's straight offside, so don't play that pass. It's not on
Mhm.
anymore. Or that pass has been screened off, it's been blocked. So what are you going to do next? How are you going to problem solve? So there is quite a tactical player development element to it. And that's where you could use it just to add a layer of gamification, support you to work with mixed ability levels, because what you'll praise John for is different to what you'll praise David for. If Rebecca's there for the very first time, what does good look like for her? She might go
Mhm.
to the scoreboard just because she had the confidence to kick the ball. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter where the ball went, you might use it at that level, but then you might get to the level of, I'm getting quite confident with this scoreboard soccer idea. I'm going to get quite creative. So if David is quite a talented player, sure, I could send him to the scoreboard. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to intentionally send his three teammates to the scoreboard at the same time. And now
Hmm.
you've created an environment where David, in regards to the challenge that he needs, he's now 1v4, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
we would all love to develop the next Leo Messi, but too many people are trying to achieve that with 1v1 drills. And then, you watch Messi taking on four players.
Yeah.
So we really need to challenge those players as well.
I love it. Like it creates a space for coach creativity as well
Mhm.
to again challenge that player, um, decision making on the fly, right? Because again, if we're doing 3 against 1 going to goal or whatever, that one is always only thinking about all I got to do is defend, right? But now, right, it's like okay, whoa, we're 3v2, but um we're down a player, we got to defend, but it's still a game, so we still need to score. And hey,
Mhm.
where's our new player coming on from? Oh, he's running over from the scoreboard, making a run in behind, and maybe we win the ball and we slip that ball into him, or her. And so I think again, it just creates all these different moving scenarios. And then I just want to reemphasize for the coaches listening, it's not just, oh, you scored a goal, but it could be something like, hey, we worked on this technique and I saw you try it out there. Go to the scoreboard, put a goal on for your team or something like that. Or hey, we just connected 4 passes, run over there, put a scoreboard, put a
Yeah,
point
and
on the
that's
scoreboard.
and that's where the importance of the coach comes in, because again, not to contradict what I said earlier about the beauty of just letting children play the game, we still need a place for that. You'll have coaches listen to this with great experience, great ideas. They're real role models for their young kids. So, yeah, that's where your coaching comes in. It's what does John need to work on, and if you see that behavior, let's praise it and do a little bit more of that. Let's use Q&A. So, what could you have done next time to have been sent to the scoreboard? And it's just about praising these positive behaviors so the children repeat them, and in time they build good habits. But there is an education element around the coaching. So one of the things when I'm working with clubs and we're doing education around this concept is one of the big mistakes, in my opinion, is, you know, okay, boys and girls, we're going to play scoreboard soccer. The scoreboard today is a passing challenge. So if you come over, you have to pass the ball and try and hit the cone. If you use your less dominant foot, you will be sent to the scoreboard. Okay, let's go and play. And you've just corrupted their motivations now. You're
Yeah.
taking away the beauty of the game in regards to decision making, problem solving. And when the ball's there for them to use their right foot, they force to use their left foot because the coach is going to give them a treat, right? So
Yeah.
we're really big on the education side of things of this concept is literally let them play football or let them play soccer and
Right.
positively reinforce the behaviors. And you make a great point there, John, as well. What comes in our experience, what comes from this is now all of a sudden it's not just, oh, we worked on the Cruyff turn today, so they're trying to do lots of that. You
Right.
can see something we worked on 3 weeks ago and say,
Exactly.
excellent, come over. You can bring it all to life.
Yeah. Well, I think we talk about a lot, right? Praise
Mhm.
the behaviors that you want to see. And I don't know that we actually define them, but in the book you defined a few different behaviors like running with the ball and passing and things like that. So, like as a coach, any behavior that I want to see, um, and again, but I think you make a really important point. Don't If you are so explicit about it, you lose sight of the game
Mhm.
versus just saying, you know what? I saw you try to take on 3 players. Didn't work, but that's okay. Go to the scoreboard,
Yeah.
so, something like that, right? And so it's like it's this unexpected catch them being good versus coach says if I do this, I'm good. Like that's not really, you've got a whole bunch of things that are good, and I'm not choosing to pick every one, but
Yeah.
maybe I see something extraordinary. Well, you just rainbowed a kid. Fantastic. Go for it.
Yeah, and you made that great point as well around and this is just experience and opinion and how I've used scoreboard soccer. Your coaches listen have complete autonomy on how they use the concept, but really to try and focus on that effort over outcome is something we talk about quite a lot. It's a concept that if David tries to score a goal but misses, you might still praise the effort to have the confidence to recognize it was a good opportunity to shoot. And if you praise the effort to shoot, then they're supported to repeat that, and naturally the outcome is going to improve. So I think we need to be really careful of focusing too much on outcomes with the young ones, because if you use this concept or any other coaching concept just to praise the children who score the goals, complete the passes, win the tackles, children not getting those outcomes are maybe going to give up and feel unsupported and not very
Mhm.
confident. Children who get those outcomes on the other side of the coin, I think their development can really slow down. They can maybe start to feel like they're a much better player than they are. Then they come across a kid, from a different part of the world who's been effort focused, and that kid has no ceiling, right? They're just always
Mhm.
trying to get better and always trying
Mhm.
to improve. So that's something that we speak about. And I've learned that, so much from your podcast, John. We used to say that this concept was all about development through praise, and about giving praise to go to the scoreboard. And you had a fantastic guest on that was talking about that difference between affirmation and praise, and shining a light on the qualities that the children have always had, and we've taken a little bit of that. So yeah, it's about coaches being creative with it, but trying not to fall into some of these maybe mistakes of predetermining the behaviors. When you see it and you like it, praise the behavior. And then just finally on that, John, but I don't want to skip too far ahead because I've been delivering this for a long time. We try and give the children some leadership roles on recognizing positive behaviors within each other as well. There's a real place for, us not playing God and always determining what's good and what's bad. Let's give the children a voice in that regard as well.
Yeah. Maybe on that topic, let me
Yeah.
ask, what's your one or two favorite scoreboards you ever saw the kids come up with, and then maybe a couple of the ones that you love the most beyond this. And I want to also note again, this doesn't just mean small sided games. Like you could be
Hmm.
playing games with goalkeepers as well.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking as you're talking, I'm like, in a game with a goalkeeper, like how great it would be to send the goalkeeper to the scoreboard to juggle 10 times. Now his team's got to figure out how to play without a keeper or hold the ball or do
Yeah.
something. So,
Yeah, I mean it's funny because I do scoreboard soccer coach education where you have the coaches and you're demonstrating things, and that's one of the questions, would you send the goalkeeper to the
of course.
scoreboard? And some of them will say, "Oh no," and why not? Because then the other kids will just shoot from the halfway line, and it's like, well, do we want to develop the next David Beckham? Why are we not working on that skill if it's in the game? And then what you find the reality is when the goalkeeper's removed from the equation, the other team need to press and they need to
Yeah.
get in front of the ball and they need to make sure it's not an easy shot. So that brings lots of benefits. But yeah, so I'm fortunate enough, when you're doing things like summer camps and you have the children for a prolonged period of time, sometimes it's good to, take up some of that time with tasking them with, designing scoreboards. And if
Hmm.
the children have designed the reward system, the motivation to be sent there and have a shot is huge.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say most of the best games have been designed by children. We had the one with both teams had a mannequin,
Yeah.
and the mannequin had like bibs and a hat and a scarf and a goalie jersey, and it was like dress the mannequin. It was the
Oh,
first team to dress the other team's mannequin would win. And these are things that coaches just would never come up with. Kids
yeah.
have great. Um, and I did bring along like Snakes and Ladders as a board game. And then
Uh-huh.
one of the kids says, "Can I bring my favorite board game?" And it was like kind of like Guess Who. I'm not sure how popular a game that is on
Yeah.
in the States, but so there's these like character cards, and you pick a card, but you don't tell the other team. And they can come over and they can ask questions like, do they have black hair? Do they wear glasses? Do they have a beard? And you have to try and guess the other team's character.
Mm.
So just like, insanely fun things that kids come up with. Um, Summer camp, we had water balloon fight was a scoreboard. So we
Ooh.
had a big bucket of water balloons. And when you were sent to the scoreboard, you'd grab a water balloon, and then if you could come back into the game and hit someone in another team, that would be a point. And I would never have thought of these things. But now you have this, it's just a game of football, but you're looking around, scanning, spatial awareness, trying not to get hit by water balloons. So, um, Yeah, for those that are listening, your kids will have weird, wonderful ideas of what could be a scoreboard. Once as a coach, you have that initial idea of what it's actually all about.
Yeah.
But not just the kids. You'll have coaches listen to this thinking, I've got something in the backyard I want to take along, or I've got something, we had a coach who sat on one of seminars, and he had like a golf, putting mat. It was one of these mats where you putt the ball and it goes in the hole and it comes back to you.
Yeah.
And he brought that along as a scoreboard. And he said to the kids, watch this. If you do something good on the soccer field, you get to come and have a little shot of golf. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I think about myself as a 10-year-old kid. That is so much fun. So much fun. And we shouldn't lose sight of the hidden learning it brings because the only reason we're doing these interventions, we're doing these scoreboards, is so kids work their socks off on the soccer field.
Yeah. And it's also just keeping it fresh. I mean, I
Yeah.
ran a program for 2 years, and the kids were, 8 and 9 year olds, and I ran that program for a couple of years, and I'd have 50 kids, right? And we always did, play, practice, play, and they'd show up, but it also becomes a little stale.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, we show up, we play, it's whatever. Kids are showing up, you're giving them bibs. And I always thought about, well, how do we make this fresh? And I was just like, oh, I wish I had this then because I would have set up these scoreboards. And I'm going to give your book when we're done to the guy who took over that program for me because I know
Hmm.
he'll love it, of how do I add ideas to this? And I have other friends who run programs. I'm like, I'm going to send them the podcast because it's just, how do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it exciting? And how do you give them that? And again, it doesn't hurt development because this is really it's still free play in those moments, right? And so they're getting their play time, and also, but you're creating scenarios where they're up a player, they're down a player, they're down two players, they have a technical challenge, all this sort of stuff within the game that is adding decision making without telling them, okay, now it's time to figure out how to play down a man or whatever. It just figure it out.
Yeah, you get loads of that experience, and that's something that, we all have opinions on the kind of, player pathway. When you're this age, you play 4v4. When you're this age, you play 7v7, and there's so much great stuff in there, but I just think the direction of travel for our young players should be, if you pause a game of soccer, you look in the same area, a couple of different times throughout the game. It's a 4v4, but then it's a 3v2, then it's a 1v4. And I
Mhm.
think if we can get to a format, and obviously this is me preaching the scoreboard soccer format, if we can get this format where you're playing 2v2, 3v3, 3v2, 3v3, 4v3, and 4v4 simultaneously, I think that can only be good for development because it's going to create those players that can recognize when they should share the ball because they have an overload. Create those players who can recognize when they should shield the ball because they're waiting for a teammate to become available, i.e., run back from the scoreboard. So there's so many hidden benefits to it. It might be, just to dive a little bit deeper, the hidden benefit might be when the kid comes to do a technical challenge, they're going to get some coaching. Because if they perform the skill wrong, you might help them. One of the
Mhm.
scoreboards we do is, hit the back of the net without it bouncing. So it's just
Mhm.
about trying to hit underneath the ball, and you
Yeah.
double the points if they can do it with their weaker foot. That
Mm.
that might be the overloads and underloads stuff, or it might be the holistic development of children that has nothing to do with soccer.
Yeah.
So when we work in schools, they come to the scoreboard and we hold up a picture and say, "What's the name of this dinosaur?" Because
Yeah.
they're working on the dinosaur in the
Yeah.
classroom.
Yeah.
Or we ask them, what's the fourth planet furthest away from the sun? Because they're working on the solar system in the
You're
classroom.
you're, you're getting past my knowledge here.
Yeah, don't ask me to answer that one. So yeah, we would all love to develop the next Martha or Cristiano Ronaldo, but the reality is we can use this tool to educate. We can use it to be rewarding and praising resilience and teamwork and sportsmanship. When they come to the scoreboard, the topic to get a point could be around anti-racism or the environment. It could be around diet, nutrition. So
It
yeah,
could
just to
it
get
could
a little
be
bit
a
deeper. Yeah,
football, soccer trivia question, right? Learn the
yeah. So
game.
we've actually so on scoreboardsoccer.com, if any of your listeners have a look, for a long time with this concept, I've said some of the most engaging scoreboards, they have like a physical thing, a board game or a deck of cards. So I've actually put together what I call the treasure chest of equipment to make really fun scoreboard games. And one of them is like quizzes, so how many World Cups has Pele won, or what color do Manchester United play in? And the kids come over and they love it. We have a kind of football version of Snakes and Ladders in there. We have dice, because you roll the dice and you multiply it, and loads of really fun stuff. So, and hopefully I've shared not just the concept, some ideas, but hopefully the creative juices from your listeners start to think, well, what could I use as a scoreboard, or what can I think of as a scoreboard?
Yeah, so let me throw that out because knowing many of our listeners are not coaching soccer, right? And
Hmm.
I think about, okay, how would this work in ice hockey or field hockey? And I can think about games that are similar to soccer, how this might work. But who's approached you in other sports and what have you seen? I mean, we were talking before I started recording, since I was just working with the Gaelic Athletic Association in Dublin, and you said, "Oh yeah, I know there's some coaches use my stuff for hurling or whatever." Like,
Yeah.
what are some of the other sports that you've seen put this to use?
Yeah, so when I put on a coach education scoreboard course, you have coaches from all different backgrounds on there. They might have initially found it through soccer, but then they're actually coaching multi-sport summer camps, and they reach out and they say, I use this at basketball, I use this at field hockey, I use this at physical activity because I'm a school teacher, and we use this for all different sports. So yeah, some of the sports you've named there, ice hockey is not very prevalent where I'm in
Right.
Scotland, where I am. But there's a coach on Twitter, Chris Sever, his name is. Hopefully, I've pronounced that right. Who I really have engaged with, and he's been creating some great hockey scoreboards, ice hockey scoreboards, and that's been great for like the learning kind of comes back. Kind of like a boomerang. I've thrown the idea out there, and now he's shown me how you can do it with an ice hockey so far, and maybe one of your listeners will correct me, but almost any invasion sport, there's maybe a place for this.
Right.
I've used it personally within basketball because that's a sport that I have coached.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not that realistic in regards to tactics, but in regards to the technical development of children getting the opportunity to dribble, lay up and shoot a hoop, it's great because you send a couple of the more dominant players over to the
Yeah.
scoreboard. So I've seen it in, field hockey, ice hockey, basketball. I've got a friend who's a rugby coach and uses it all the time within rugby. So yeah, it's very, very transferable to other sports.
Yeah, but I mean, I think even in non-invasion sports, if you really sit down and think about, okay, how might I use this in golf? How might I use this in volleyball? You'll figure out ways that you can make this a competition, right? I would think about in golf, right? Just kids lining up and hitting sand wedges and trying to hit a target or whatever, and it's like, yeah, you hit a target,
Yeah.
you get a point for your team, and you know,
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because I've thrown this out there, and there's been some other words that I didn't consider. So, disability sport is one that some have came back in because you have a lot of potentially have a lot of additional support needs within one session.
hmm
So, having a concept where you can line up rewards with that person is great. We
hmm
have a big culture here in the UK of walking football. I'm not sure if
hmm
walking soccer has became too popular in the States yet.
I've
Um,
seen a little bit. I used to call it over 50, but okay.
Yeah. So again, I didn't consider this, but someone from a walking football session said the thing about our walking football session is all we do is play 7v7. So every week it's the same guys, it's the same environment, and it's the same. We don't do any shooting drills or any rondos or what can be considered that kind of fun stuff,
hmm
replicating the professionals on TV. So we seen Scoreboard Soccer and we thought, well, that's a really easy, something fun to throw in. And they did a scoreboard that was like, they were just playing football, but they'd come over and it'd be like, who won the FA Cup in 1965? And they were,
hmm
tying in scoreboards to kind of music and sport and
Right.
pop culture from their generation. But sorry, the story that you reminded me of is a teacher on Twitter said, I coach soccer, I used your scoreboard, but then I thought, could I use this in the classroom?
Yeah.
asked the question of, whether it was a math question or a spelling question, I'm not sure. And when the pupil got it right, they came up to the front of the class and they did something for a bonus point. And I thought,
Mhm.
you know, I'm under no illusion maybe stuff like that's already existed, but I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think as you think about it and get the basic concepts, I can't imagine there's a sport where you couldn't figure out like a little bit of, okay, how does this apply to what
Mm.
I'm coaching? And I mean, I even though we're talking a lot about younger kids and things like that, as kids get older and better, there's still times when we're adding some life to, I mean, you watch pros train and you
Yeah,
play, some sort of fun competition and everyone's totally into it and they want to win the competition. And so to
yeah,
have some small-sided games, in this sort of genre of, oh, we have two games going and what's the scoreboard in the middle? And again, advanced players chipping a ball off a crossbar or,
yeah.
got to sink a three-pointer in basketball or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
there's
absolutely.
plenty
And
of ways to do that.
I used to, through the experience and how long I've been using scoreboard games, I used to almost kind of defend that, this is for adults as well, and this is for teenagers, and this is for everyone, and they'll enjoy it, as well. And now I'm starting to think like, in some regards, they enjoy it more. Like
Yeah.
the beauty of soccer is, it can make you feel like a kid again. And there's so many, very high performing adult teams out there. They're doing small-sided games anyway. The idea of giving them an idea that's going to make those small-sided games constantly provide overloads, underloads, and the high-performing players. I've seen it being used, as I say, at teams really, really high up in the footballing pyramid, which is great. And then when they come to the scoreboard, it could be something really silly and fun to make them feel like a kid again. Maybe they had a really heavy defeat at the weekend, so you want to build morale and you want to have fun. Or maybe their scoreboard comes and it's a bit more serious. So I've seen scoreboards where, it's a line of mannequins and you try and you hit the free kick around the mannequin into the goalie. You're just working on your free kicks. And then
Hmm.
you get back into the small-sided game. I've seen scoreboards at the, professional level where they take their central defender out and they turn them into the scoreboard. So they put a square of cones, they put them in the middle. When somebody's sent to the scoreboard, you try and dribble through that square and past that defender. And the coach is given that one-to-one coaching the defender on their body
Yeah.
position, their timing of and then just the final one, just to give an example, I've seen a scoreboard where the person who hits the corner kicks is at the corner flag with a load of, soccer balls.
Yeah.
There's some small-sided games going. When you score a goal in the small-sided game or the coach sends you over, you run over, the ball comes in and you try and finish it for a point and you get back on the pitch. So,
Yeah. Great.
yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity to do it with adults. And having played the games myself, I can say they're really good fun.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people are like, oh, this would be great for kids. But like when you just like you're doing your sessions or I'm doing coaching education sessions, I'm playing the same game with adults. I'm like, you're all laughing at popping balloons or whatever is going on here. Like you're having the best time. Why wouldn't you think this would work with your kids or whatever? So it's brilliant. Well, David, tell people how they can you mentioned scoreboardsoccer.com.
Mhm.
How can people buy the book and how can people connect with you if they want to just touch base and get some ideas or get some connections in other sports?
Yeah, and yeah, I appreciate the platform to share this because I love sharing the concept because I tend to get good scoreboard ideas in return. So my email address is just, David at scoreboardsoccer.com. And I'd love to connect with anyone who's got a question or some feedback or maybe wants me to come and deliver to their club. My kind of underlying motivation is just to try and give children a better experience than I had at soccer. So I really enjoyed kind of street soccer and playing with my friends, organized sport. I didn't have such a great experience. So, if I can educate coaches out there and they can pass on these fun ideas to children, that's the goal. So yeah, you can visit scoreboardsoccer.com and you check out loads of different scoreboards with loads of different outcomes. So there's fun ones, there's technical ones, there's physical ones, so just about children building up their physical literacy. And then
Yeah,
there's
and I
those
mean,
educational ones. Yeah.
in this book there are I don't know how many different ones, but it's dozens. So
Yeah.
you won't run out of ideas this season. I can promise you that.
Yeah, if you just on the internet just search for Scoreboard Soccer Book, you should find somewhere to purchase that, and it goes through the concept, it goes through a load of scoreboards, but then it also shows how you'd maybe use them within a full session and maybe within a full kind of season plan as well. So there's quite a lot of additional ideas in there as well. So yeah, any coaches that want to connect, as I say, it's just David at scoreboardsoccer.com. My social media handles are at Coach David Baird. And I love connecting and learning from other coaches. So, yeah, look forward to hearing from anyone.
Brilliant. Awesome, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate you being on. This was a wonderful conversation, and I will echo it's a great book and it's a great concept. And, I get these things that come across my path, and there's not all that many that I'm like, oh, I can't wait to gift this to a bunch of people, or I can't wait to send this podcast to a bunch of people because I know that they'll get it right away and be like, oh, my, thank you. This is what I need to freshen it up this season. So, listen, man, thanks so much for being on the Way of Champions. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thanks.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you to David Baird. Scoreboardsoccer.com is the website, and David at scoreboardsoccer.com is the best way to get a hold of him. I can't imagine that you listened to this and didn't come away with some ideas that you can add some excitement and some competition to your practice. Of course, if you're working with very young kids, having these type of scoreboards, if you're running camps and clinics and things like that, man, a ton of great ways to liven up your sessions. And even if you're working with senior players and college kids, well, you're going to have those moments where you want to make it a little more competitive. Set up a little scoreboard, set up a little challenge in there, and see if you can turn that into something that's a little bit more exciting. Okay. But I highly recommend the book Scoreboard Soccer. And I think, again, if you just reach out to David directly, and if you have a different sport and you want to bounce some ideas off him, I'm sure he would be more than happy to help you out with that as well. Okay. Thanks to our friends at thanks to our friends at Sprocket Sports. For all their support. Thank you to our Patreon podcast champions who are the ones who support this podcast every week with a little donation. If you want to become a supporter, go to patreon.com/way of champions. And thank you to all of you who share this, who leave reviews, who listen to the podcast every week, who email us and grab our books or our courses or attend the stuff that we do, because it helps us put this out every week. And we learn a ton, and hopefully you do as well. So remember this week, your influence is never neutral. So go out there, influence your kids a little differently, add a little scoreboard to their games. We'll see you again next week, everyone.